after being in the spiritual field and exploring consciousness for over a decade, and now in the last few years, I've been heavily involved in learning about business and learning about money. I've seen some pretty interesting patterns that business people tend to have, and also spiritual people tend to have, that, in my view, tends to prevent, for example, spiritual people from having more money, or tends to prevent business people from being a little bit more empathic, a little bit more aware of their environment and the people around them. And of course, I know I'm talking in terms of just generals. I know this definitely doesn't apply to every single person, but I think for the majority of people who go into those fields, you can tell that some of these stereotypes definitely tend to come through quite often in certain people, in certain places and environments. So in this episode, I really want to explore what are some of those qualities that make spiritual people this way, and what are some of the qualities that make business people that way, and what can we both learn from one another so that we are all more balanced within ourselves. So let's start. So, one of the first things that's really well known within the spiritual field is this idea of how important it is for us to be in the present moment, to live in the present moment, to focus only on what's here, right now, and not worry about the past, not worry about the future, but be right here, right now. While I definitely have seen how important that is in my own life, and I've seen how much this idea could help people in their own lives, there's definitely a sort of a negative side to that, with regards to, if you are only living your day being constantly present, then that means you can't really, it becomes more difficult to think about the future, to plan for the future, to plan for what you might want to create in your life, what your bigger vision in your own reality is. And this is actually something that business people tend to have. Business people tend to be very future orientated. They're thinking about, if I put my money in this investment, what is that going to get me in the next 5 years? If I buy this property right now, what am I going to be able to earn from it, in the next 10 years, if I sell it, for example, in the next 10 years, or if I rent it, etc., etc. So this is one of the biggest differences that I first noticed when I started going more into the business field, and really learning about the kind of the mentality, the business mentality that people have within the business field. And it really struck me because it was very different from what people in the spiritual field are taught, which is, live in the present, focus on your emotions right here, right now, which, yes, serves amazingly in certain moments, in certain phases of your life. For example, you've just gone through a massive trauma and you need time to, you really need time to process what's actually happened. You really need to give yourself the time and the grace to allow those feelings to fully be processed, to be processed through and out of your body, because that's really how we heal. Ideally, the ideal case scenario would be we stay very present with what's happened and allow ourselves to fully feel that feeling, to fully process it to the point where it actually leaves our body, and we no longer have to re-experience that moment again. So that's great in those type of moments. So being present, amazing for those type of moments, for those type of situations. But outside of that, it's kind of impossible to live your life only being focused on the present, because there are always things that are coming to us from our past. If we made a mistake in the past, then you can kind of sit down and be like, okay, what can I learn from this past mistake that I can now take away and not make sure that I don't make the same mistake into my future? And I feel that business people definitely do that better. And, this idea that we're learning from our mistakes that we've done, for example, from your business. Maybe you went bankrupt, maybe, you made a mistake or you trusted the wrong person. It's very important for a business person to be able to sit and think about those past mistakes that they did so that they can learn from them, allow them to transmute them, and going forward, and when making decisions into the future, they now no longer need to create those same mistakes. So and again, guys, I know spiritual people also do that. I'm not saying that they don't, but I'm just talking about the stereotypes, okay? The second thing that I've noticed that seems to be very, very a common thread within the spiritual community, and it has an opposite sort of side of it in the business community, in the business field, is this idea of going with the flow. We all know that everyone who's been in the spiritual field, who's been learning about, ancient knowledge, we all know about this idea of going with the flow, of allowing the energy to just take you somewhere and kind of just going with that energy flow and not really trying to grasp onto things or hold onto things or, go back on things. We all know this, and this is such a great teaching. Again, in certain fields, in certain moments, in certain phases of our life. So this is great, for example, going with the flow. If, for example, maybe you are backpacking, you're traveling, and you don't have a certain kind of a mapped out itinerary of exactly where you need to go, when you need to be there, how long you're going to be there. Personally, having traveled and backpacked through South America for a number of months, I can totally tell you that sometimes that is the best way to go. Sometimes not, but sometimes it is. Sometimes it is great to just go with the flow and see, see where you go. Maybe in certain places you want to stay for longer. So that going with the flow and not having this itinerary of things that you have to do exactly as they are really can help you to have a full experience of a place. Maybe you feel really connected to a certain place and you want to stay there for longer. So why not book your stay, allow yourself to stay there as long as you want. And I think having this kind of flexibility of going with the flow is amazing in those type of circumstances. On the other side of the scale, we have, more the business mentality, which is more going with trends. So they don't exactly go with the flow, they go more with the trends. They go more with kind of where there is prediction or there's some sort of proof that, for example, this specific stock is going to grow within the next 5 to 10 years. And that's kind of what I've noticed in terms of the business minds, the business people. They tend to go more with the trends rather than going with the flow. So in a way, they're also going with the flow, but the flow has more, I guess there's more backing behind it, behind the decisions that they're making. There's more kind of information that they gather before they actually go with that flow and, invest into that specific stock or buy a property in that specific area. There is a lot of, I guess, insight research that they do in order to really figure out whether that is the best place for them to invest their money or to move to this specific area. And of course you would, because it's, if you're giving a large sum of your money, you're investing literally your savings, then you should do the research before you invest anything in. So you, in the business side, in the business kind of mind, going with the flow would be a pretty bad idea. So that's kind of the major differences that I've seen between the two. And again, I think if we both kind of learn from one another, if maybe business people try to go with the flow, but more in terms of where their energy is feeling pulled towards, so if they kind of start to listen to the internal compass, and are kind of like, okay, I know that this area, there's a lot of findings and research behind this specific stock, how do I actually feel about that? How does my body feel in terms of wanting to invest in that stock? I think that's kind of an improved way of thinking about it, something that, business people can maybe learn from spiritual people, and kind of improve on their own way of how they do things with their business. And equally, what can we learn? What can spiritual people learn from the business way or the business perspective in terms of going with the flow and learning about trends? Well, again, a lot of people, uh, I feel, from the spiritual kind of community struggle a lot with making money. That's a already kind of a quite well known sort of a trend, that's been happening within the spiritual community, that everyone in the spiritual community is pretty aware of. So what can we learn from the business perspective that can help us improve in that? So maybe one thing we can do is, for example, look at the trends in terms of what seems to be within the next 5 years, what seems to be the most urgent or needed type of service. So, for example, holistic treatments, wellness treatments, anything to do with the holistic and wellness arena seems to be a pretty good bet in terms of learning about those, either becoming a practitioner yourself or learning about those, or even if you want to investing money in those fields. Because again, if you look at the trends, the wellness area, the wellness field is supposed to like double in the next 5 to 10 years. So many more people are investing into holistic practices, into holistic medical treatments. A lot of people moving away from the medical sort of pharmaceutical industry. And again, this is one way in which I think people who are in the spiritual field can definitely benefit in terms of looking at the trends of where the sort of these trends are going, the holistic trends, the wellness trends, the spiritual trends. And in spirituality, for example, there's a lot of there are a lot of findings, and a lot more science is now going into proving that consciousness can exist outside of the brain through near-death experiences, for example. So that's one that would definitely allow a lot of people to really understand consciousness as a concept in terms of what it is. So again, this is one way that we can kind of use each other's tools from the business and the spiritual side to learn from one another, and to become a little bit more balanced within ourselves. Also, another one to add to that in terms of going with the flow. So something else that I've noticed in terms of this is more on a daily, in terms of your daily practice. For example, how we schedule our day, how we schedule our week. What I've noticed a lot of people in the spiritual field tend to do, and myself included, we tend to be a little too flexible, shall we say, on how we schedule our day. If we do have, if we work from home, for example, or if we work on our own business. People in the spiritual field, definitely, I know, guys, please don't hate me for this, but it's true. We definitely tend to have a very bad relationship with time and with scheduling and with discipline. And discipline is one thing that people in the business field definitely seem to have really nailed down. And of course, that's not everyone, but if you look at any millionaire, any person who has a substantial amount of money, or is has founded a number of different businesses and knows a lot about business and the business sides of managing things, in order for them to even get to that level, they need to have very, very good discipline in place. And anyone will tell you, anyone in the business field will tell you that there's no way you can achieve any of this without having a very strong discipline in place. I've never heard people in the business field use things like, oh yeah, just go with the flow and just see where it takes me, and I do whatever it is that I want in my day, and then just do my work whenever I feel like it. No one in the business field would ever say that. And please correct me if I'm wrong. If you have someone who has openly said that, feel free to add them in the description, in the comments below. But again, this is a big difference that I noticed when I started to attend more business seminars, and seminars about money and crypto and how to start your own business. And this is definitely something, just hearing people who are in the business world speak, the way in which they speak is also very you can just tell that it's very, they have that discipline in place. They're very very strict with themselves in terms of in terms of what they do on a daily basis. Okay, another big thing, big difference that I've seen between these two sides, these two fields, it's very well known, you know, retreats, for example, are very, very popular. There's a lot of people that go on retreats. I love going on retreats. They're amazing. They're needed. People need them, especially as like a timeout, as a way to really just reset, really just disconnect from everything. People need to give themselves the space, whether you're a man or a woman. You need to have the ability to just pause everything and be able to step away from everything and be able to reflect, refresh, recharge yourself, and then go back into, you know, working or just doing life in general. Now, what I've noticed is people within the spiritual field tend to give a lot of importance to that. And as I just mentioned, it is very important for us to give ourselves the time to do that. But what I've noticed is that most people within this field tend to, you know, prioritize going on a retreat rather than saving money or investing money into something that might actually give them a return. And that's something that business people do really, really well. They tend to think of, okay, where can I have this sum of money? Where is the best place for me to invest it in so that I get a return? And with the money that I receive from my return, I can then go on holidays and, you know, retreats and all of that stuff and buy myself nice things. That's kind of the mindset shift that I've seen really, really clearly within the two fields. So spiritual people tend to think again more in the present and like, I need a retreat right now. I'm gonna book a retreat, you know. Whereas people who are more business orientated, they tend to think, okay, I'm going to put this money, I'm going to invest it into something that I know I have a pretty good idea is going to give me some sort of a return. And so I'll put my money in that. And when I start getting the return, I will spend my money on a retreat or, you know, on one of those things. So that's kind of the biggest difference I've seen between the two in that field specifically. Another huge one that I've noticed, especially over the years when I used to quite literally work at a college that taught courses on psychicness, that taught courses on Reiki and energy healing, on tarot, numerology, pretty much everything under the spiritual umbrella. And one of the things that I noticed was that there were some people that used to come in, and at the beginning of every sort of, I guess, you know, semester, like school year, or, you know, every new quarter, they would book so many courses and so many workshops, and they would just, you know, just, it's almost like they were just ticking them off the box, you know, like one course about, you know, energy healing, tick, one course about tarot, one course about numerology. And these people just be coming, you know, year after year after year and just booking all of these workshops and courses. You know, it's like, wow, it's so much information, which is great and which is amazing because we all want to learn. But one thing I noticed is that people, again, in this field, they tend to learn a lot and a lot and a lot and a lot, but they don't really do anything with that knowledge. You know, we don't really, it's like there's this huge gap between what we're learning and what we know and what we can actually do with that knowledge. It's like, yeah, you know, I'll start my own practice, I'll do this with this knowledge, but then they never do. And this is a really common trend. And again, guys, please let me know if this applies to you. I would love to know whether any of these apply to you, whether you have a different perspective on anything. Feel free to put it in the comments. I would love to hear what your perspective is on these. But from what I've seen so far, like the spiritual field is littered. Okay, sorry, the foreigner in me is coming out. But it's full of people who are just constantly learning and absorbing so much, like so much information, but they never really do anything with it. It's kind of, it just sits there in the back of their mind, you know, just ready so that those few times when they get into these deep conversations with like someone new or someone that they know, they can just bring up all this vocabulary and all this information and just throw it at you and, oh, look at me, look at how much I know. And again, I've been that person, so I can speak from experience. Um, and again, this is great. Yes, you know so much, but what have you got to show for it? Have you done anything with this knowledge? And now moving over to the business side, this is perhaps one of the most positive things that I've learned from business people is that they actually do stuff with the knowledge that they gain. They go to a course and then they learn stuff and then they apply it to their business straight away. They learn from a coach and then they apply it straight away to their business, and then you're just seeing the results straight away. It's like boof boof boof, everything is just so quick. It's like they learn and they apply, they learn and they apply. Whereas with spiritual people, it's like I'm learning, I'm taking all this information. It's like this never ending just well of information that just doesn't ever seem to go anywhere. And and I'm sure, as you would know, studying anything in spirituality or in the spiritual field in general only makes you realize that there is so much more that you don't know, and that learning actually will never end. Like, there's just so much to learn within this field. It's like the spiritual field is Pandora's box. It's a whole another world in and of its own. So there's just always so much to learn, which is amazing. But the negative side of that is that you're not doing anything with that knowledge. You're just accumulating it and accumulating it, and you have ideas and you have things about what you can do with that knowledge, but then you never get to actually do that. And if you don't actually get to use that knowledge to create something of your own, then what's the point? What's the point of learning? Yes, of course, one of the points is that we learn more about ourselves and become more balanced and in aligned within ourselves. Yes, that's a big plus. But then ideally you want to be able to pour that knowledge out into the world, and to teach other people, to show other people what can be done when this knowledge can be applied. And I think this is something that definitely, again, the spiritual people can really learn from the business sort of mindset, is really try to be more strict with yourself in terms of how often you apply this knowledge. Learn something and then apply it. Apply it to your own system, apply it to your own work, apply it to your own coaching or business or whatever it is that you're doing. Apply it. Okay. Okay, we're almost at the end, guys. I just have two more. Within the spiritual teachings, a lot of information can be useful, but also a lot of information can be kind of twisted and inverted in a way that is not so helpful to the individual. For example, a lot of people who are learning about sort of the history, and kind of where we came from, and it's kind of more spiritual, galactic knowledge, I would say. Indigo children, that there's some people that are sort of like their spiritual archetype, I would say. I don't know exactly how to describe it, but these spiritual archetypes, right? In terms of what you came here to do on this planet, for example, what your purpose or mission is, right? Within that, it's kind of like the ego going for the back door. It's like you get into some of these teachings about indigo and star children and star seeds and this and that, and there's definite sort of like an undertone of I'm more special than you. I'm here on this mission that you're not on, or you're not part of. There's definitely these undertones between in a lot of things within the spiritual field. Okay, and that's, for me, that's not true spirituality. That's not real spirituality. I think it's become, these parts of it that have become very twisted and inverted, and I'm going to do a whole episode on that because I have a lot to say, trust me, on this theme. But apart from that, yes, so yeah, there is this idea that we kind of put ourselves on pedestals, and kind of it gives us this false false idea that we're here to do this very important work, or important, we have this very important mission that we're here on. And this builds this false sense of, again, like self-importance. We think that we know more than other people who are maybe not on this mission, or There's something very special about us. And again, guys, I'm totally speaking from experience because I myself definitely got caught in quite a lot of these wormholes, I want to call them, because that's exactly what they are. It's like you just go down this negative spiral and it's just not good. But that's definitely something that tends to predominate the kind of the new age false spirituality. I want to call it false because it is false spirituality. For me, that's not real spiritual teaching. This whole idea that some people are more special than the other, like we all play a part, we all have something to contribute to this reality, and that's the truth of it. So on the other side, what I've noticed with people from the business side do is they tend to earn, they earn their place on that pedestal, for example, even though it's not a pedestal, but it's, they earn that respect through the work that they put in, through the work that they do. So for example, someone who has worked on their own business for, the last 10 years and has really grinded themselves like to the T of, making sure that this business flourishes and is doing what it needs to be doing. They, at the end, if that business becomes profitable, or if it's doing what their mission was of the business, then they've earned that place because they've put in the work. So there's kind of a big difference between earning your place and really putting in the work, and just calling yourself, you like putting a badge on yourself and saying, oh, I'm from this galaxy, I'm here to do this mission, and so I'm different than you. And I know not everyone sees it that way and not everyone acts in this way, but there's a lot of it in the new age spiritual field, and again, it's just not helpful. And I think what we can both of these sides learn from one another is, if you think that you're here to do something, then show it, do it, put in the work, collaborate, allow yourself to really contribute through your own energy into the world with the ideas that you have. Put your ideas out there in the same way that, for example, here, like, one thing is for me to be thinking about this topic, about this episode in my mind, and I can talk about it all I want, but until I actually sit down and record the video and put it out there, then it doesn't really make much of it's not helping me much if it's just all stuck in my mind, right? So I have to put in the action, I have to put in the work and actually do the thing I sat here to do. So again, those are two very distinctly kind of different sides of the coin that I think can really learn a lot from one another in terms of that narrative. And the final thing, which is kind of leading on from the previous point, again, one of the big differences that I would say makes, for example, people who are in the spiritual field not so successful, and makes people who are in the business field successful, is this idea that, we create these kind of fairy tale visions in our minds that, again, we're waiting for some savior to come and give us the information that will free us all, and that will help to heal us, and that will help to heal humanity. And again, I think it's not down to just a couple of people. Like, for example, with the whole Jesus complex, it's not just one or two people, it's everyone should be participating with their own unique gifts and skills and ideas. And I think this is, again, something that the business mindset, it has really mastered. In business, you apply. It's all about application. You have an idea, you apply it, you try it, you fail, you learn, and then you start again. It's this constant, like, learning and getting back up, learning, failing, and getting back up. And it's this kind of this mentality of really not giving up, but doing it no matter what, like taking the action no matter what. And I think this makes the vision that people within the business field have a lot more grounded. It's a lot more grounded in reality. It's something that's a lot more tangible, and something that we feel we can actually physically create by step one, step two, like an actual structured way of working towards it. Whereas a lot of us in the spiritual field, and again, I'm definitely have gone through these phases where I was like, my gosh, this information is going to save the world, and it will change people's minds and lives, and it's very easy to get caught up in that. And in fact, I think many of the things that we learn in spirituality can change people's lives, and they do. They have changed people's lives for the better. But again, that's the thing. Unless we have a structured plan of actually applying these things and and putting these ideas, taking these ideas from our brain, from our mind, and pushing them out there into the field, into the collective, then there's no way that that's going to affect really anyone. And yeah, obviously it makes it more difficult for you to actually gain the positives out of everything that you've learned. So again, this is something that I've observed. And again, guys, take it or leave it. This is just one person's perspective on these two opposing, or what we think are opposing sides. But actually, I think they're a lot closer than we think. But that's something that I think if we were to kind of exchange, exchange some ideas, exchange some sort of skills and things that we've learned and information, I think both sides can really benefit really, really like a lot from each other's knowledge, from each other's skills and ideas that we have from both sides of these perspectives, because both are very important and both have um, such such an important way of looking at reality, and such an important way of dealing with reality. One deals with it from a more energetic point of view, the other one deals with it from a more physical point of view, but either way, both are very, very important. And the whole idea of our reality is that we combine both of these fields together, not just have one, or not just focus on like one or the other, but have both of them in mind, and work and move forward with both of them in mind. So I hope this helped you. I hope this was useful and valuable. And please, guys, let me know if you have any other things that you think maybe belong in this episode. Maybe I'm going to do a part 2 to this episode. Let me know in the comments below what has been your experience, whether you're coming from the spiritual field or the business field. Let me know what are some of the common threads that you have noticed that maybe work or don't work for either of those fields. I would love to know what you think. And so with that, I'll leave you, and until next time, take care.